Hi, my name is Michael Nolan
I'm Dylan Gallagher.
with Andrew Reichland behind the camera. Today we are interviewing Mrs. Maria Sali. This is our History of Milwaukee oral history.
It's December 11th, 2023.
All right, Mrs. Sali, thank you for being here with us. When and where were you born?
I was born January 25th, 1973 in Milwaukee at St. Joseph's Hospital.
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
I grew up on Booth Street on the corner of Booth and Wright. Nice little two-bedroom home. The neighborhood was predominantly German and a little bit of Italians.
Yeah, speaking on that, did you, like the Italian in the neighborhood combined with the German, did you sort of stick together more with the Italian culture, or did you also, were friendly with the German neighbors as well?
Friendly with the Germans as well, but the majority of the time we did a lot of get-togethers with the Italians in the neighborhood because my parents were both immigrants, so it helped because they could speak the same language.
How many siblings did you have in all?
2 brothers.
So in a 2-bedroom house, did you have to share a room with your brothers?
I did. So when we were really little, we actually, all 3 of us slept in one bed. And then as we got a little bit older, my parents bought twin beds, and I would sleep in one, and my brothers would share the other one, and they would sleep, head and foot. So every once in a while, one of them would complain about a foot being in their face. So.
Were you close with your brothers as a child? I would assume so.
Always.
Yeah.
I, to this day, am still very close to my brothers. I've done a lot with them throughout my life.
What were your parents like and what did they do for a living?
My father is, so from Italy, he was a master construction worker. But when he came to the United States, he worked at Falk Corporation, so he was a molder, and he also worked in building maintenance there. My mother was a homemaker, but she also worked helping out a cousin of hers who was a tailor. So she would help him with sewing and tailor type jobs. From time to time.
Do you have any memories of your father's work? Like, did he work long hours pretty much every day?
He did. So because my mom was a homemaker, he would work sometimes a full day at the factory, and then with a couple other guys, they used to do side jobs, and they would pour concrete for people. And so he would do that at night. So sometimes we would be in bed before he even got home from work.
How was it not seeing your father as much as a child?
It was a little difficult just because, he wasn't around as much. So, like, my brothers and I didn't really join a lot of, like, sports and activities because we didn't have any, my mom didn't drive, so we didn't have anybody to take us anywhere. Most of the time, my dad would take time off from work just so we could go to the state fair every year for a day, or we would go to Festa Italiana in the summer on Sunday. Vacations, we only took a vacation like every few years, and we would only go to Italy because that's where our family was. We didn't go to Disney. We didn't go anywhere in the United States. So it was hard not having him or not seeing him all the time. But we understood why.
Yep. Where did you go to elementary school?
So I went to Franklin Pierce, kindergarten through 6th grade. Then I went to Cass Street School for 7th and 8th grade because the elementary school didn't go up to 8th grade.
What was Franklin Pierce like? Do you remember enjoying going to school as a kid?
I did. So because my mom didn't drive, we had to walk to school. So when I started kindergarten, my brother was 3 years younger than me, so my mom would watch me from our porch as I was walking down the street as far as she could see me, and it didn't matter if it was cold or not. But as soon as I'd get to school, I would go to the office and they would let me use the phone, and I would call her and tell her that I got there safely. And I've been doing that my entire life since K-5, all the way until the day I got married. I'd call her every day and say, I'm at work, or I'm at school, or so she knew that where I was and that I was safe. This was before cell phones were around, of course.
Because you could walk so closely to walk to school every day. Did most of the kids in your neighborhood go to the same school?
Yes, we did. After a few years, there was a kid in our neighborhood whose grandfather had a really big car. So he would just kind of drive down our street and pick up myself, my brother, his grandson, and then like one other kid that lived across the street from us. So he would drive us to school every day. On the way home, it was a different story because my dad wasn't available, and sometimes the grandfather wasn't available either. So we would either walk or some of us would take the bus.
So you were mainly friends with all of the people in your neighborhood? Yes,
in fact, growing up, my best friend, who was 2 years older than me, lived directly across the street.
As a family, when you were young, did you all go to Mass together as a family?
Yes, we did. Every Sunday. We'd go to St. Rita, which was, at the time, they would call it the Italian church because that's where all the Italians went.
Was that close nearby or not really?
No, it was, it's located on Cass Street, which is where the middle school is, but next to it.
Did you ever partake in any Sunday school as like a religious education? Since you went to
only in second grade when I had to do First Communion.
What were some activities or hobbies you enjoyed as a kid with your friends or just around the house?
So growing up in Milwaukee, we would actually, as kids, especially in the summertime, we would just play outside. So we would play hide and seek, we would ride our bikes to the schoolyard, we would play basketball if someone had a hoop, which was kind of a privilege to have a hoop, and you also had to be careful because sometimes the hoop would be gone the next day. So we would shoot some hoops and ride our bikes from our homes to like the schoolyard and just kind of go around, the yard and race each other. Hide and seek outside, kickball in the middle of the street, and then we would have to move every time a car would come. And then we had to just make sure that when it got dark, we were already inside.
Would people steal the basketball hoops?
Mostly the net, so then you were left with just the rim, and then, that it's harder to tell if the ball goes in or not if you don't have a net. But that was when we were kids. Once you get older, then it's easier to play, but yeah.
You said you had to make sure you were home, before the streetlights came on, kind of. So were your parents pretty strict? Like, did they have pretty strict curfews for you every night?
Yes, actually. I grew up in a very strict family. So my mother, because they were, part of it I think is because they were immigrants, so they just wanted to make sure that we were safe. I always had to be home at a certain time. We always ate dinner together at the dinner table every single night, whether my father was there or not. And bedtime was always at the same time, so usually we were in bed by 8 o'clock. As we got older, that time obviously was extended, but as little kids, yeah, we always had to be in bed at a certain time.
Did your parents have any sort of activities that they would do in their free time that you remember?
They would usually, like on the weekends, get together with the other neighbors, the Italian neighbors, and sometimes they would, like I remember my dad playing cards, with some of the men. The women would just, sit around in the family room or a different area and talk all night. Us kids would play together. And then in the winter it was inside. In the summer they would sit in the picnic table until like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Those are some of the memories I have of the neighborhood.
Did they have any sort of specific clubs in general that they were a part of, or just sort of just come together in the neighborhood?
So my dad belonged to a religious club, the Madonna del Lume, and he still is a member to this day, including my brothers. They would hold meetings at the Italian Community Center, and every once in a while, like maybe once or twice a year, they would have a get-together and they would have a party, a Christmas party, or they would have a dinner dance where anybody could attend. And it was a way of gathering the Italians that came from the same part of town in Sicily that they're from.
Mm-hmm. What was sort of the Italian events and parties like when you were growing up, like going to those sort of dances and dances?
I always thought it was really cool because we got to dress up and they would have a band, like a live band, not a DJ. And the adults would dance, and it was fancy food and all. It was interesting as a kid watching that, and you also got to meet like other families that were similar to yours. So it's like you felt like you were still part of the traditions and the camaraderie of the Italian community growing up. I remember one year they held a dance at the Italian Community Center, and I was 13 years old, and there was an older man. He was probably in his 20s. But because I was tall, he approached me and I got so red and embarrassed, like I didn't know what to say or do. But then he understood, that like I was little, because he asked me to dance and I said, no, I don't want to dance. That was fun.
You said that coming together with all those families, you said most of them, or at least in your neighborhood, you said most of them came from the same town in Sicily?
Yes. So some of them had been here already for like a few years prior to my parents coming. A lot of these people came in the 60s and early 70s. So they were a little bit more established in the neighborhood. So when my parents came, some people they knew from back home and some they didn't. But they got to know them once they were here. And they were always very helpful, especially when you come to a country and you don't know anybody. It's nice to have people helping you and giving you advice, like especially with the language and a lot of the complicated things. What I mean by complicated is, whether it was banking or even shopping or having to deal with buying your first house, things like that. And a lot of these people in the neighborhood were there for them and helped them out the first couple of years. It wasn't until I was older, being the oldest, I helped my parents down the line with a lot of these things, to the point where then they didn't need others' advice. I would tell them, no, I think you should do this and you should do that.
Did any relatives, or did you have any cousins that also had come over from Italy that lived in your neighborhood?
No immediate family. So my grandparents, all my aunts and first cousins all live in Italy. The only relatives that we did have here are my father had some uncles and an aunt And so they were, great uncle, great aunt to us, and then my dad's cousins. Some of them had a couple children that were in my age group, so, it's more of a second cousin as opposed to a first cousin. All our first cousins and relatives live in Italy to this day.
Transitioning out of elementary and middle school into high school, where'd you go to attend high school?
I went to St. Joan Antida High School, which is an all-girl Catholic school. It's located also on Cass Street in Ogden. And it's a small school. They only take 100 per grade. So my graduating class, we were only 65 girls.
Do you remember enjoying St. Joan Antida?
I did. I had fun at St. Joan Antida, and I have a lot of good memories. I didn't participate in any sports, but I worked after school. And so what I did was I went into politics. So I was in student council freshman and sophomore year, and then junior and senior year I was officer.
What did you do for the student council mainly? What were your main jobs?
So freshman and sophomore year, I was the representative of the class. So basically, we would just attend the meetings and then report back to our classrooms any activities or things that we were planning on doing. Sometimes dances, sometimes St. Joan Antida, because it's a small school, we used to have Cultures Week, and we used to have what we called mini courses, where you would take for a whole entire week fun classes that were like outside the norm. And so there would be like parents or some of the teachers would put on like a class. I learned how to do CPR, and I got certified through one of those types of classes. So it was kind of fun stuff. And those were all organized by student council. Then once I became an officer, then I was part of the planning committee. So then I was the one that would help make decisions on what we were going to do. When I became a senior, I got voted as class president. I organized a class trip. So we did two actually trips. One, we did a cruise, and then we also did a day at the Dells.
What were the students like in your clubs and the student council? Was it fun, or were they weird, like strict people?
So actually, St. Joan Antida was a very multicultural student body. So it was very interesting. We had people. We had a group of girls that came from Vietnam, so they were Vietnamese girls, and they lived in the dorms with the sisters. We had, a group of Puerto Rican girls, Mexican girls, the black girls, the Italians, the Polacks, the Germans. We had a girl from Egypt. She was a foreign exchange student, and at the time we thought it was really cool because that was the first time we ever had a student that was from another country. So it wasn't weird. It was fun because there were so many different ideas and different ways of doing things, and we all got along.
Because it was so multicultural, did the girls at the school all come from the same area, or I would assume different areas across the city?
So a lot of them, we all came from Milwaukee, but we did come from different parts of Milwaukee. So some of us came from the east side, some of us came from the far northern Milwaukee, some of us came from southern Milwaukee, some of us came from West Dallas area, and they would come by bus. My senior year, my family moved to Brookfield, so I used to drive down every day from Brookfield my entire senior year, back and forth. So I didn't want to leave the school. As a senior, it's like you're finally at the last, point of your high school career, and I had a lot going. I had a job. I didn't want to transfer to a Brookfield school at the time, so I commuted.
What was it like commuting from Brookfield to Milwaukee?
If I can say it on video, it sucked. But I will say this, I never missed a day of school. In fact, I was awarded a perfect attendance plaque at graduation because I never missed one single day in 4 years of high school. And there was a snow day, and because I lived in Brookfield and I had to leave early to get to school on time, I never saw that classes were canceled. So I got to school, I saw that all the doors were closed, and I'm like, oh, great. So I went to the front door, went into the office, and the secretary's like, oh, honey, classes got canceled today. Well, because I worked at the bakery, I left to school, went to the bakery, and stayed there for a few hours. I wasn't going to drive back after, such a long trip just to get there. So I made the most of it.
Because it was an all-girls school, you said that you had dances and sort of social events. How were those coordinated? Were there people from other schools that would come? Any boys from different schools that would attend those?
Yep. So we would invite Marquette High School, St. John's Academy, and there was one more. I believe it was St. Thomas More was the other all-boys school.
You mentioned working at the bakery. When did you first get into working there?
So I was actually in 8th grade, and my family, my dad would stop at the bakery after work every day and pick up a loaf of bread, and including weekends. And so I happened to be with him one time, and I went in and I saw that they had a sign on the window that they were hiring. So I asked the clerk, how old do you have to be to work here? And she said, I don't know. But she handed me an application. I filled it out, brought it back. And then a couple weeks go by, and it was like close to Thanksgiving, like the holidays were coming around. It was a Sunday. And I asked the owner's daughter, or granddaughter, I should say, I saw her and I said, hey, Jackie, I said, I applied here like weeks ago and I haven't, nobody called me. And she's like, we didn't. I'm like, yeah, she's like, why, you want to work here? I said, yeah, I want to work here. So she's like, well, what are you doing right now? I said, I'm nothing, I'm going home. I just came from church. So she's like, okay, go home, change, and come back. I've been there since.
Wow. That's a quick turnaround.
Yes, hired on the spot.
For the video, which bakery is it that you work at now?
Peter Sciortino Bakery. It's on Brady Street.
So, because you've worked there for so long, there's got to be sort of a culture within the bakery. And have you seen sort of the culture in the neighborhood or the area change over time?
I have. So a lot of the older restaurants and some of the shops that were originally in the neighborhood when I was growing up as a kid a lot of them are no longer there, or they've changed completely. There's been new development. In the early 90s, they developed a lot of the east side of Brady Street, where now it's like the Walgreens, we call it the Walgreens shopping center. There was a lot of new construction too, new buildings that went up with apartments. A lot of the neighbors with the houses, everybody fixed their houses up, and some stayed, some moved out. So we saw a little bit of a switch in the neighborhood over the years. But for the most part, I would say it still is fairly family-oriented, with the exception of, where there used to be a leather tannery that went from probably the end of Brady Street on the west side of Brady Street all the way to what is now Knapp Street. And it was a huge factory. That is all apartments now. So that was the biggest change in the neighborhood, or the biggest change in that area over the years. There also used to be a freeway that used to end right where the Pick and Save is on Ogden. And, they tore that down, and now there's, the Pfizer Forum is there, and banks and other buildings and apartments and hotels. So that was the other big change in the area.
What was it like working at Peter Sciortino's during high school so much?
It was actually a lot of fun because I worked with a couple other girls my age, so we would go after school and put in a couple hours and then go home, and it was kind of just a way to get our mind off, like a release from school, do something else, get your mind off of homework. And we also learned how to do stuff. I really enjoyed, as a kid, I used to work with the baker, and we would make the Danish dough from scratch, and then the pies and the cakes and a lot of the desserts that we would put out. And I remember as a kid, because he was an older man, I remember as a kid I used to say, "Why do you have to be so sloppy?" And because I was the one that had to clean up after him. And he goes, if you wanna make good product, you have to be sloppy. And it didn't make any sense to me. And to this day, I'm like, I think he was just sloppy. But we used to make cookies, and on Saturdays, like there was a specific day that's all we did all day was make cookies. And I would work with the owner and the owner's, grandchildren, who were the ones that ran the bakery at the time.
Speaking of the owners, did you know them and like the Sciortinos personally at the time?
I did not know Mr. and Mrs. Sciortino personally, but their son-in-law, who was married to their oldest daughter, was our family dentist. So I knew him.
Were in the work environment, you said that their grandchildren ran it. Did you sort of get to become close with them and sort of enjoy being around them and working with them day to day?
I did. They were a lot of fun. They were very outgoing people, and they would joke around with us or tease us because we were the kids, so they would make us do all the worst jobs, but in a good way. We were always learning something. And they also had a nice side to them where they would occasionally, take us to a Friday fish fry at the Italian Community Center, or they would take us to a Brewers game. And, that created some fun memories.
As a whole staff, they would take you there?
Not the whole staff, just some of us. Yeah.
How was going to the Italian Community Center for fish fry? What was that like?
That was interesting. There was always it was very loud. I remember it being very loud. I also remember one year there was a political candidate that was running for president that showed up, and gave a speech, and it was right in the middle of the fish fry, and that was so unexpected. But I'll never forget it because I thought it was so cool that, this person could potentially be the president of the United States, and I got to see him and meet him, But that person didn't win.
Unfortunately. You said that the owners and sort of your bosses at the bakery sort of had you do a bunch of different jobs. So how did your jobs at the beginning when you started working there shift into not what you do now, but what you sort of did as you grew older?
Sure, over the years. So initially I was hired as the dishwasher. So I would come in after school and I would find a stack of all the trays of the baking that was done for the day. And at the time, I didn't have a nice big 4-compartment sink. I had a small white porcelain kitchen sink, and I had to wash all these pans one by one, rinse them, dry them. Then the sink would become very, very, very dirty. and I had to scrub the sink. I would have to wipe down the counters, sweep, vacuum, throw out the garbage. On the weekends, I would clean the bathrooms. That was never fun either, but it taught me a lot, about cleaning. And as the years went on, I learned different tasks. So then I would assist with baking, but I never stopped doing the cleaning job. So I would do cleaning, I would assist with the baking, I would help the staff in the store at the end of the day. And as the years went on and I got a little bit older, then I asked, when could I learn how to work in the store? So then I was 15 when I started working for the first time as a clerk in the store, helping customers, using a cash register. But again, I still would do the cleaning and I would still help with baking as well. So it wasn't until I was in college that I no longer did the cleaning. I would just work in the store, and on the weekends I would help with the baking. Post-college, I would only work there on the weekends, so I only worked in the store.
Speaking of which, where did you go to college?
I went to Marquette University.
What did you study there?
Finance was my...
At the time, did you know that you wanted to continue working in a bakery, or did you sort of want to go off and find a different job?
I did not. So actually my goal was to go into the stock market and become a broker. So that was one of the reasons I went into finance. As a kid, though, I wanted to become a lawyer. Actually, technically, I wanted to become a judge. I wanted to be a judge, and I wanted to own a Porsche. Those were my dreams as a little kid. And so I went into business as my major with the intention of becoming a business attorney, lawyer. And I only applied to one law school at the time, and I applied to Marquette because I wanted to stay in the area. I never lived on the dorms or anything. I commuted from home all 4 years of college as well. And I did not get accepted. So I took it as a sign that maybe law wasn't the field I was meant to go into. And so I ended up working for M&I Trust Company, which that company, the bank, no longer exists. It got bought out by BMO. And I never dreamed that I would someday, become the owner of the bakery that I grew up working at.
Mm-hmm. Working at M&I, what was that like? Did you enjoy that job?
I did very much so. So I actually started working there as a senior in high school because our high school had a program. It was a co-op program where they would place you in a business setting, whether it was a bank or an insurance company. And at the time, I was hired by the bank, and I worked in the trust company. And they would, at the time, I did a lot of filing and a sort of clerical work. And I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed my bosses. It was fun. Before I graduated high school, I applied for a teller position. And so my job at the bakery actually helped me land the job as a teller because I had cash handling experience. And in my interview, and I'll never forget it, she didn't talk anything to me about the teller job. All we did was talk about the bakery and how much she loved it. And so I left that interview and I went upstairs to my other clerical job. And I was like, wow, I don't know how that went because she didn't ask me any questions about like my, capabilities. And I got to my desk and my boss at the time came up to me and she said, oh, so-and-so called for you. She'd like for you to call her back. So I did. And she's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, you're hired. So again, I got hired on the spot because I'm awesome.
Being a teller, did you enjoy that more than the sort of clerical job, or?
Oh, absolutely. I got to meet a lot of interesting people. It was more face to face. You know, I even got to meet the president of the bank. Customers that would come to the bakery, I also see them at the bank, and that was always fun. So it was more. It was more challenging because as a teller, it seems like it's an easy job, but you do have a lot of responsibility. Your drawer has to balance at the end of the night, so you can't make any mistakes. You also get, they're called secret shoppers, and what they are people that pretend to be a customer coming to do banking, but they're actually testing you to see if you cover all the points that you're supposed to. And so you always have to be very professional, and you always have to make sure that you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. Because if you get a bad review from the shopper, well, then that affects your performance, you know, your review at the end of the year.
What was meeting the president of the company like, and did he just come in to make a transaction?
He did. It was fun, and I didn't know at the time. And then after he left, one of the other clerks next to me goes, "Do you know who that is?" And I'm like, "No." She's like, "That's the president of the bank." I'm like, "Oh my God! How would I know? Like, that's the first time I met him." So it was good that I didn't know who that was, because I probably would have been more nervous. Where I didn't know that he was the president, so I was a little bit calmer and more myself, and I did a good job, because then his secretary ran into me in the lunchroom and introduced herself, and I actually became really good friends with her.
You said there were people you saw at the bank and the bakery. Are there specific people or specific stories from those people?
A lot of them were just regulars that I didn't know that they banked there. But the very first time, so I actually worked in the drive-through the majority of the time, because I was a part-timer. And it was occasionally when there was a shortage of tellers upstairs in the lobby that they would bump me up. And so in the drive-through, you don't see the person live, you see them on a camera. So the first couple times that I popped up on the camera, they would look at me and they're like, "I know you, you're from the bakery. What are you doing there?" And a lot of times they would try to tell me, "Oh, can you like put me down for an order?" And I'm like, "No, can you call the bakery?"
What was it like working at the bakery simultaneously working at the bank?
Every once in a while, I would just mix up answering the phone. I would forget where I was at the moment, but other than that, I thought it was different, because one, I had to dress more professionally, and then the other one was more casual. So it was kind of nice to have both. A taste of both worlds, you know, like I didn't always have to be in jeans and sneakers. I enjoyed like actually putting on a nicer outfit, you know, business casual is what it was called at the time.
And you worked at the bakery on the weekends?
I did, every Saturday and Sunday, so I never quit. I used to pick up actually extra hours during the holidays. I would use my vacation from the bank, my paid vacation time, and go help them at the bakery instead.
Did you enjoy doing that?
I did. I really did. And I think the owners at the time appreciated that I did that for them as well.
So moving from there, you mentioned before Festa Italiana. What was that sort of experience like for you as a first-generation Italian growing up in Milwaukee?
It was always a lot of fun as a kid, because the best part of Festa Italiana has always been the Sunday Mass with the procession of the saints, and then the fireworks afterwards. You know, it was always like magical or something different, you know, that you didn't see. None of the other festivals had fireworks. It wasn't until years later that some of these other ethnic festivals started adding fireworks to their agenda, but Festa Italiana was the original, and that's what made Festa awesome, and the food.
Oh yeah, that too, definitely. Would you go there as a family, or did you later sometimes just go with friends?
As kids, we'd go as a family, and because my dad worked a lot, we only went on Sundays. So we would go in the morning for the mass, which was usually held on the largest stage, and you would sit there for 2 hours in the sun. That was the hard part of the festival. And then the procession would take place, a portion of it outside of the grounds. So the societies would have like their particular shrine. And so they would wheel it or carry it around the festival grounds. And there was a band and all the priests. And we would go to the location, which now it just has a sort of a monumental plaque there where the old Pompeii church used to be. And they would do a blessing of all the saints and everything and the church. And then we would make our way back to the grounds. And then they would shoot off the fireworks, and it was not the bright fireworks. It was a battery of fireworks, so it was like the white loud ones, and that would go on for like a good 10 minutes, and that was always the best part because then you knew that the worst of it was over because our feet as kids would hurt, and you were tired, and you were sitting in the sun. But you don't forget these things, These are the things that stick with you.
You said that the different societies would process around. Do you remember your parents ever being a part of those processions with the different shrines?
Yes, so both my parents were part of the Madonna de Lumi Society, which is the Virgin Mary. She's the patron saint of our hometown back in Sicily. So they both became members when they moved here right after getting married in 1972. And so my dad was part of the men's group and my mom was part of the women's group. And the men are the ones that would carry the shrine during the procession. There was other groups as well. There was the St. Joseph's group, which was a different town. There was the Pompeii group. They had like a little replica of the Pompeii church, and they would push that around. Some of the societies. The Holy Crucifix. That was another one. And a lot of those societies now have aged and they're not as active anymore as they were, especially when I was a kid. It was a larger group and it was bigger. Festa was bigger. Now it's gotten a lot smaller.
Did you experience the first Festa Italiana?
I don't remember it because I was very little. But I think the first one started in 78. So yeah, I would have been 5. So I don't really remember it, but I'm sure I was there.
What was obviously the food there is awesome, but what was your favorite food at Festa that you would look forward to?
Well, that's my parents actually, what we would do after the procession is we would go home so that we could rest a little bit. So my mom would always cook dinner, and then we would just go down to Festa and buy something for dessert. So it was either cookies from Sciortino Bakery or a cannoli. Sometimes we would buy the sfinci, which is the fried dough. again, it's something sweet, so it was more or less we were having dessert at Festa and not so much a meal. As I got older then and I didn't need my parents around to buy me food, then I would go and buy my own. I used to enjoy the Pitches used to have a rotisserie chicken that they would do for Festa. That was really good. Angelo's would do the mozzarella, or not mozzarella, lasagna sticks. Those were really good too.
You spoke of the shrinking of Festa Italiana. What are some of the major changes you've seen to the fest?
So a lot of the community has either moved away or passed away, and the younger generation either isn't joining or they're just not as involved as the older original founders were. And so as the years go by, it seems like the festival is just kind of getting smaller, not just physically, but also like in attendance as well. I know that they're trying to bring it back to what it once was. I just feel that there's too many factors in the way that are preventing that as well.
At Festa, was Peter Sciortino's pretty involved there? Did you guys have a booth there? Did you sell?
Very much so. So the original owners had a booth there, and they were probably one of the busiest locations as far as vendors. But their menu was very small. I remember I was actually 10 years old, and my dad's cousin, I should say, used to work for Sciortino's. And I think that's why I wanted to work there so badly, because she's 10 years older than me, so she was kind of like my role model, and I wanted to be like her. And so she took me when I was 10 years old to help at Festa. And at the time, they were only selling little bags of cookies and the cannoli and a bag of the Jordan almonds with the candy shell. And I remember they had me as a 10-year-old like walk around the table and put the cookies in the bags. And they were doing that right there in the booth. And I thought that was the best thing I could have ever done. And I didn't think about it at the time that it's like, wow, like they were making me do the worst job possible walking in a circle. But I was happy and I was excited. And then I got to put the cherries on the ends of the cannoli, It was fun. It was fun at the time. I didn't think of it as labor. I just thought of it as like, it's so cool that I'm in a booth, working and I was there with my cousin.
Mm-hmm. After that being your first experience, when you actually started working at the bakery, would you go back and help every year at Festa?
I did. So the owners, we would actually start like about a month ahead of time, and we would make all the cookies, and then we would package them all. So at each year, their sales, they would get busier and busier. So they decided to do the packaging then at the store itself. So first, I would help them with the baking of the cookies, and then I'd help them with the packaging of the cookies, and then we would make the cannoli shells. So that would be hours just standing in front of a table and rolling them by hand, one at a time. And I thought one year we got to like 3,000 shells in one day. And I thought that was like incredible. Like we were so fast. And it wasn't until years after I became the owner that I was like, 3,000 is nothing. Like we went through that in just one weekend, So, but at the time you think, you set goals and you're like, oh, wow, we made 3,000 in just one day. That for us, it was a lot.
Yeah. You mentioned when you eventually became the owner, how did you shift from working in sort of in banking and in the finance district, and how did you shift into eventually taking over the running of the bakery?
So my brothers both worked at the bakery as well as myself. And it was actually my brother Joe who one day was making bread with the old man, Mr. Sciortino. It was just the two of them, and they were just talking. And my brother simply asked if he would ever consider selling the business outside of the family. And Mr. Sciortino said, "To who?" And my brother said, "To me." And he said, "Are you serious?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm serious." He's like, "I'll talk to my wife and I'll let you know." Well, that little conversation sparked a bigger conversation. And then from there, they asked our parents to come down, and we had a meeting. And we talked about it as a family as well, because we were still, I'm the oldest, and I had just finished college. My brothers were still in college when this all happened. So it was a big decision. And when I transitioned, the work end of it was no problem because, like I said, I grew up there and we knew the job. Same with my brothers. What was different is becoming a boss. So now all the employees, because they were older than us, that was the hardest part, was now us telling them what to do. And it was difficult. We did have a few that, didn't really appreciate a bunch of teens telling them what to do, because we were teens. My youngest brother was only 19 when we took over. And it took a while for everybody to adjust, but I think for the most part, once we established ourselves, and the Sciortinos never left us dry and high. They were always there to support us, helped us if we needed to with like any decision making or advice. And after about 4 months of being the owner, I decided to leave banking and stay with the bakery full time.
Wow. You said the Sciortinos stuck with you guys. Are you guys still in contact with them, and do they still help out sometimes?
So Mr. Sciortino and his wife did pass away several years ago, but their oldest daughter and their youngest daughter are still living. Their middle daughter did pass away as well. She actually passed away months after leaving the bakery, retiring. It was very sad, actually. Like, she didn't get to enjoy her retirement at all. And so we're still in touch with now the daughters and the grandson. And we still have a very close relationship. In fact, there's a poinsettia sitting on my deli cooler right now because their youngest daughter, Jean Ann, carried on the tradition of every year they send us a poinsettia for Christmas. And in return, we send them a nice big package of cookies and bread.
Have you, in now taking sort of ownership and running the bakery, have you pretty much kept everything the same, the recipes the same, or have you sort of taken liberty with them?
So both. The original recipes for the cookies and the bread are still the same ones that Mr. Sciortino had. But over the years, we've also added to it, expanded the options in the cookies. So we went from, a smaller case of maybe 12 options to 30, and then from 30 now we're up to like over 40 different types of cookies. And then in the breads, we've also expanded. We've gotten into frozen products. We also now do pretzels. We do a lot of different specialty breads for a lot of wholesale customers and restaurants. So we still have the base that we started with, but we've also added to it over the years just to kind of keep up with the times and also keep the business always interesting and modern.
In the way that you run the shop, has it pretty much sort of been the same since the Sciortinos had ownership, or have you sort of changed the vibe of the sort of the running of the shop?
We, over the years, have, we started out doing things exactly how they taught us to, because they did work with us as well, like, you know, this is what you do, how you figure out your totals at the end of the night, and how much bread do you make, how much cookies do you make, things like that. Also the accounts receivables and payables and things, and that type of part of the business. Payroll, we never did payroll before, we had to do payroll. So a lot of it was very manual, the way things were done by the Sciortinos. And so over the years, we've, automated a lot of the steps. Some stuff you can't change and is still done the manual way, the way we were taught. Other things that we can automate, we've made the changes, and it just kind of makes things faster and also makes our life a little easier too.
In working at such a sort of storied place for so long, have you seen in the area where, I'm assuming there were regulars when you worked there when you were young, have you seen sort of the same people coming and going throughout the shop over the years?
Yes, and it's actually, I've seen people that have passed away. I've seen kids that grew up in the neighborhood are now adults and married and have their own children. And over the years, it's also changed from, we used to have, a line of older men standing outside the door on the weekends because they had their routine. And that line has gotten smaller over the years. It's also changed because a lot of them have passed away or moved away. Sometimes they don't necessarily pass away, but they don't live in Wisconsin anymore. They moved to like warmer states. But we introduced online shopping, so we now ship, all over the country. And around this time of the year, I see a lot of orders and messages from people saying, I used to live there and I miss you guys so much, and I'm happy that you ship because it's tradition and it brings back memories of when I grew up in Milwaukee. So even though people are no longer around, they still seek us out, and I'm happy that we were able to modernize and do a shopping cart so that people can still get the things that they grew up with.
Has the area around the bakery, sort of around Brady Street, has that always been pretty tight-knit ever since you started working there at the very beginning?
Yes, it has been. It's been, there's still people around from day one that I remember. A lot of them even, to this day, are still that regular customer that comes in every day. Some of them have, if they moved away at some point, what's interesting is that if they come into town for any reason, whether it's a wedding or a family reunion or even a funeral, they still stop at the bakery as one of their destinations while they're in town, and that's always nice.
I know you mentioned before that St. Hedwig's is nearby.
St. Hedwig's is actually across the street, and so Sundays have always been a very busy day at the bakery. I know people in the past have always asked, why are you closed on Monday and not, why wouldn't you close on a Sunday? And it's for that reason, is because we actually our busiest day of the week is Sunday, because people go to church and then they come out of church and they stop at the bakery and buy their bread or their dessert for Sunday dinner.
Has it always been that way? Had people
Yes.
come from the church?
Yes, it has, and I remember growing up in the bakery, we used to look at the clock and say to ourselves, "Oh, church lets out in 5 minutes," and we had to get ready because we would get swamped for a good half hour, sometimes an hour, depending on the amount of people that were exiting the church. So. We would get slammed, and it was always around the time where we, the staff, wanted to eat our lunch, so you had to kind of plan around that. You had to plan if you were going to have lunch or if you were going to have breakfast, and do it before church, or you had to wait until the crowd dwindled down, and then you could take your lunch break.
In working there, in sort of a historic place in Milwaukee, I would say. I know you mentioned to us before that there have been some sort of experiences with sort of public figures that have come in to the bakery.
Yes, yeah. It's been great. I've had the pleasure of meeting Governor Scott Walker. He's a very, very nice man. I was so excited, and at the time I wanted to talk to him more, but I couldn't because there were other customers in the store. We've even had some national celebrities come through the bakery as well. One time for Festa Italiana, we had Buddy Velastro from Cake Boss, and my brother was his chaperone for the day, and so they stopped at the bakery and we gave them a tour, and and we talked. It was fun because we had a similar background and similar upbringing, and so to him, seeing our place, he's like, it brought back memories of when he was a kid growing up working for his dad and their original location in Hoboken. So yeah, that was a really great experience as well.
For sure.
Are there any other individuals of Milwaukee history that you've met, players or?
There have been, not necessarily at the bakery, but one time, and I mentioned that the original owners, their granddaughters, ran the bakery, and one time they took us to a Brewers game, and it was a meet and greet, so I got to meet some Brewer legends, Hall of Famers now.
Wow.
I got to meet Robin Yount and Paul Molitor and Cecil Cooper.
How old were you when that happened?
Oh, I had to be probably about 13 or 14. It was one of the earlier years that I had just started working for the bakery. That was so exciting. And at the time, it's just a Brewer player, but getting to meet them and take a picture and shake their hand. And I unfortunately don't have the pictures because the person that took the picture was someone else, so they kept them.
Do you have any other last stories or memories that you'd like to share with us?